Our first speaker today is Mrs. Roya Ashrafabadi. She is a family member, she's a political activist and a human rights activist. She is a member of the victims of the chain executions of the 80s. And she will address the subject of extrajudicial summary and arbitrary executions in Iran. Greetings to all of you. We can talk about arbitrary executions and extrajudicial ones when the government has a rule of law and the government acts according to the law. But what kind of a law, really? The dictators and governments that are ruled by dictators, they really think that they act according to the law. The characteristic of the law is its truth. And the truth in a law, it is based on justice. And the characteristic of justice and what is based on it is lack of discrimination and recognition of each one's rights. The existence of discrimination and not acknowledging the rights of people and the lack of balance between crime and punishment, it makes us think that that law is not a just law. The laws of the Islamic Republic of Iran and its constitution does not respect these principles. The constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran in its totality is an ideological one. It's biased and it's anti-democratic, and one cannot say that it respects any of the Declaration of Human Rights principles. In any government, no government can actually do anything against the law. But unfortunately, the concept of the guardian of jurists actually undermines this principle. He is the one who can do whatever he wants. Any kind of crime, any kind of assassination can take place. When we talk about law, and when we talk about the rule of law, the idea of freedom, human rights, and equality is what matters. And when we talk about, what we stand on are the principles of human rights. And let us look together on the executions of the 80s. If you all agree, we will continue until we can actually fix this technical problem that we have now, because we don't have any sound here. According to the laws of the Islamic Republic of Iran, in Article 32, 38, 37, 35, 166, 169, and 168, there are contents and different articles that, if they were to be respected, sorry. Now we have the sound here. Sorry, they're going to put the video. In the 80s, we've had arbitrary executions, and they are considered as crime against humanity. We can call it really, or define it as a genocide. This black page in the history of Iran, according to the framework of the Constitution of the Republic of Islamic of Iran, is considered as a legal act. Why? Because the highest power, the person that everyone turns to, Velayat Faqih, the guardian of the jurist, he is the one who actually declares a fatwa, and he is the one who actually gives a ruling, and he can actually say whatever he wants, and he can actually give a ruling that is against the constitution, and it can be applied and done. We know that Khomeini, after this ruling, apart from one person, Mr. Montazeri, Ayatollah Montazeri, was the only person who did not want to participate in that. Everyone was silenced about what he did, about the chain killings or the executions of the 80s. When it comes to law, All of these people should be prosecuted. The principles of international law and the government of Iran as an entity should be judged and prosecuted because of its commitment of genocide. And different individuals in the government, from the highest ranking person to the lowest person, it doesn't matter if that person is not considered as a reformist or anything. I think the court should be the one that should judge. In the 80s, who were the ones who participated in this genocide? Who were the people who were in the government? The rule of Khomeini was very clear for everyone, obviously. After that, we had different committees that were in charge of these deaths or executions. We know in Tehran, we had Judge Nayeri, we had General Prosecutor Eshraqi, and a member of the Ministry of Intelligence, Pur Mohammadi. At that time, Khamenei was the Prime Minister of the country, and the President of the country, and Mir Hossein Mousavi was the Prime Minister of that time. And as the Prime Minister of that time, he was one of the high-ranking officials of the government at that time, and that is why he is considered as one of the key criminals of this chain executions. Now I would like to repeat that again and say, I do not want to talk about politics or ideologies here. This is a legal discussion that we have now. As a Prime Minister of that time, he was the responsible person for all the ministries and all the ministers, and among those ministries were the Ministry of Intelligence, and the representative of that ministry was a member of the committee of these killings and executions. And according to Montazeri, the Ministry of Intelligence of Mousavi actually did worse than what Sovak did, which is the secret police of the time of the Shah. And everyone at that time accepted the fatwa of Khomeini. And at that time, in 1888, and after the second wave of the killings, a terrible thing takes place in an interview in television. Mousavi is being interviewed by an Austrian TV channel. Not only he does not say anything against those killings, he defends them, and he says that we are obliged to do something against those powers that want to oppress us and want to take the power away from us. And then he says that if some of the leaders of the third world countries, like Allende, if they were able to oppress their opponents, then they would have succeeded. And this is Mr. Mousavi for all of you. In Article 32, 38, 37, 35, and 166, 169, and 168, we have different concepts or ideas that if we were to act or to apply them, and we had the rule of law according to that, maybe many of these crimes would have not been committed. But we know that the fatwa from the Imam is much more important, and it's beyond the law itself. The Article 32 says no one should be arrested can be only arrested if there is a ruling from the court. On Article 35, it gives us the right to choose a lawyer, and Article 160 says the court ruling should be based on legal contents and principles that should be borne in mind in order to have a court ruling. And unfortunately, none of this is applied and respected in the Islamic Republic of Iran. To choose a lawyer is one of the things that the government does not respect at all, and the justifications for so is worthy of being listened to. Lajavadis, when he talks about this, and he says the following: the reason is that lawyers, they do not want to take on the defense of these people, because a lawyer does not have any purposefulness to defend these people, because they don't accept what these accused ones, these people, have done. It's very interesting to think about what he says. He doesn't bear in mind the presumption of innocence, for example. And he doesn't bear that in mind. And the other point that I would like to mention here, and we have to ask ourselves, in what part of the world a lawyer should accept what an accused person has done and believe in what he's done so that he defends that the client. So if we want to discuss about what Judge Abadi said, we will understand why lawyers who are paid high amount of money, who are obliged by the principles of international law, they should defend their clients. But unfortunately, and many of them have done so, and unfortunately, some of them were actually sentenced for with terrible terms, and they were taken to court, and they have been arrested. In 2013, the head of the Iranian tribunal, he says that the correct application of the Islamic laws can actually prevent crime from taking place. He says that cutting the hand of a thief, or part of a member or a body of someone who's against God, or who's considered as someone who waging war against God. A few months after that, the judiciary they sentence one of the thieves to cut his hand, and bearing in mind that the judiciary in Abadan, they have a rule courting to cut a member of that the fingers of that person. At the same time, people who were accused of the same crimes, each one of them were sentenced to 74 lashes, and some of those people were actually sentenced to death. And it's amazing, these contradictions. People who are committed the same crime, they were given different punishments. 11th of December 2013, we have the head of the judiciary who says that according to religion, going against the punishment of death penalty is something that is considered as against Islam. And you know that when someone says that you are challenging the principles of Islam, you know what you will be up to and you know what you will face. The part of what we're talking about is that we are worried about the executions that are taking place in Iran, and these are concluded in reports that were given to the Council of Human Rights. And we have asked different international organizations to help us in our endeavors. All of this was part of the resolution 40 that was passed, and according to that resolution, they've obliged the government of Iran to act according to international principles, laws. And according to the statistics of the group of human rights activists in Iran, and bearing in mind those statistics, 654 executions took place last year. And the majority of these people, they were sentenced in unlawful court hearings, and the details of the court hearing of these people were not public. And that is the reason why the ruling of these court cases are against human rights principles. And the reason, we don't know why 29% of these people who were executed, why they were actually given this sentence, why were they executed, and the fact that we don't know why they were given this sentence is in itself is something against human rights. From 2,248 people were killed in the past 5 years. We have in the area, in the region of Fars, we have 28% of these people, and for the past 4 years until the date, 195 people were executed in public. After the establishment of the last government that we have in Iran, 470 people were executed in Iran, and we do not know the gender of half of these people, and 23 of these executed people were women, and in the last 3 years, 58 women were were executed in Iran. And more than half of the executions in Iran are done in a secretive way. The secretive executions have actually doubled the number of other years. The official executions have actually they were raised to 14%, and more than half of these executions were done in Alborz, in the western Azerbaijan, in Sistan and Baluchistan and Kermanshah. In the 80s, many of the families of those people who were executed in that decade, when you wanted to go and receive the body of your loved one who was executed, they would count the amount of bullets that they used to kill your loved ones and then charge you for it. And when you actually paid for it, you would actually be able to get the body of your loved ones. And now, after all these years, and according to the sources responsible for the human rights, Abdullah Jahan Sari, he is 26 years old, and his brother were sentenced for participating or for drug trafficking, and they were executed. The high officials did not accept to give the body of these two young men, and they tell them the following: you give us 11 million toman as a money that we used for the rope to hang your children. And they wanted 11 million toman in order to give the body of these two young men to their families. We don't want to now tell you the sources of this information that we want to share with you. They said that the mother of one of these two boys managed to get 5 million toman, and begging these officials and getting this money from here and there, managed to get the body of her son in order to bury him. And according to other reports, we have juvenile executions, or juvenile people who are executed. We have people who are 18 years old. The case of a young boy who was 18 years old, and according to the website of the Mujahedin, we hear about Nafise Ashraf Jahani, who was 9 years old. She was executed. Afsaneh Farabi, she was 12 years old. Fatemeh Jaberzadeh Ansari, she was 13 years old. She was executed about 20 years ago. Shala Qurbani, 13 years old. She was executed about in the 80s. Alauddin Rahmati, 12 years old, was executed in the 80s also. And Masoud Razai, 12 years old, January of 88 was executed. According to the human rights activist, according to the report that was issued this year, we have two cases where we had the majority of these cases were actually done in Islamic court. And many of these cases were juvenile. They were less than 18 years old. We have Barzan Nasrullah. He is a Sunni, and he was arrested 4 years ago in Sanandaj. And he was, Qazi Muhammad Mughisi was the judge who sentences him to death. And he was 17 years old when he was arrested. The second case has to do with Bahram Ahmadi. He was also a Sunni. He was arrested in January 2010. When he was arrested, he was less than 18 years old. And the court ruling and the death penalty was actually a legal thing for the case of these two boys. We have Ali Reza Mullah Sultani's case, who 3 years ago was 17 years old when he was publicly executed. And the officials in the judiciary, they say that they actually count the age of the accused according to the Islamic calendar. And it's a strange thing, because the calendar that actually prevails in Iran is the Iranian calendar. And so they basically use that as a justification for what they do that. Article 14 in the International Convention for the Civil and Political Rights is the article that actually obliges us to respect the rights of people, and it says that death penalty can only be applied when these court hearings are done in a justful and a lawful court hearing, and the accused has the ability to claim the court ruling. But unfortunately, none of this is done or being applied in the Iranian judicial system. Unfortunately, my time is very short and limited, and I have to talk very briefly. According to reports that we have received from local activists, the prisoners who were executed in a secretive way in Mashhad, they did not know until the very moment that they were executed. They had no idea that they will be executed. The prison officials, just a few hours before this was done, they take these people and they tell them, they announce or declare to them that they will be executed. They tell them that they have to write their will, and they tell them to go and wash their bodies. And the officials of the prisons, they actually make these prisoners to remain in a place, in an open area, and they hang these people. And the days that these executions are done, the telephones of these prisons are actually suspended, and no one is allowed or is able to call these prisons, and none of the prisoners obviously are allowed to call them. And the doctor in charge who works in the prison, he actually writes the reports about the death of these people just a few days before this is done even, and they say that this execution is actually a legal one. They declare it as such. The head of the judicial system in Iran, Mr. Laijani, a few months ago, he says that they say that in Iran we have collective executions and done in a secretive way, and I say and I affirm here that this is a big lie. All the rulings related to executions are actually done according to the law. If those people, obviously he refers to people who say these things, if they really know that there is in any place in our country that these executions are done in a secretive way, they should let us know so we can go and investigate these cases. I can only say that the person who does not know is actually an ignorant. The person who knows and is silent, then he is part, he's part of that, he takes part in that crime, he's responsible. Thank you very much, Mrs. Ashrafabadi.